That's the theme of this podcast, theme of our movement, and it's sometimes it seems limiting when we see the violence that's visited upon our fellow citizens in Minneapolis and otherwise. But it is necessary. Tim Snyder and others will counsel us that that is the way. Dr. King, that is the way, and the alternative is to give in to the violent impulses of the MAGA movement, of Donald J. Trump, the fascists, the ethno fascists, because that gives them an excuse to dial up the pressure and their own violence. And they are armed and if not uniformed, members of law enforcement that are authorized to carry loaded weapons. And not all of us are authorized to do the same thing. And it wouldn't turn out well in the long term, even though it might be satisfying in the short term sometimes to have a more aggressive conflict. But not advocating for that. Just the world we live in, celebrating no kings while acknowledging. I was pleased to be on a feed earlier today with some very thoughtful young people. I can say that because most people are younger. That were the limitations of protests such as this. I understand and acknowledge that point. You know, when when the level of institutionalized racism in our country is at a fever pitch, where we can hardly distinguish the difference between our country before the substantial but not sufficient civil rights progress in the 60s, where a lot of times what we're living in and the way that our government is treating us, particularly those in marginalized communities, not 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 as much crackers like this. The way that people are being treated, women and people in marginalized communities, you wouldn't know that the progress that was made by Dr. King, helped along, some would argue, by LBJ, some would argue by RFK, the reals, not the whatever the fuck, HHS, and others, many others, you know, that John Lewis, that we are in, excuse me, Reverend Jackson, that we are being set back, not just years, but decades with the Trump administration, the MAGA movement, the Project 2025, and the other evils of around the world, the ethno fascists and those that would prefer to blame all of the shortcomings in our life and world on immigrants, which is, it's silly talk, but it's so loud that we have to confront it and deal with it. And we'll do that in the midterms, and we'll take another step uh, at that point. But before then, after that, in between the midterms and the general in 28, we got work to do every day. So that's use use your voice, use your platform. You look at the reach of people on legacy platforms, people like the Bulwarks, the Don Lemons, the Aaron Parnas, the large reach on Substack. Everybody has to take their turn and raise their voice and point to the cynicism, the racism, and we're not taking any victories. We can acknowledge steps in the right direction while stipulating that it ain't enough. That's kind of the balance, that you want to do both, but emphasize the shortcomings and emphasize the violence and the indignities that are being done every day. So that is, we'll call that part one of Sunday. This is of course the Word Traction podcast. I was working earlier today on what will be the Saturday premiere of a new once a week show that will be focused on working with AI and the impact of AI on our economy. As I was reading that, and you don't want to delight in financial pressure on any individual, certainly, or any company, because there are very real impacts to, friends, family, neighbors, brothers, and sisters work for some of these companies. So even those that are on our shit list, you ultimately want them to succeed. Even take the Disney's had a very bad short. They have a new CEO, and a whole bunch of things have kind of made the beginning of his career a less than auspicious launch. And we look at it and we're like, oh, Disney. Yeah, we boycotted those motherfuckers just like months ago. It seems like yesterday. It's in Trump time. It's hard to keep track that we were successful in making an impact by unsubscribing to Disney Plus. That was in the wake, of course, of the Jimmy Kimmel silliness. It works. Collective action. It's Sunday. I'll only say that 4 or 5 more times, but it works. Disney is not a member of the Fantastic, excuse me. They're not a member of the Fantastic Five. That wasn't what I was getting at. The Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven, of course, was a number of different things. It was a pretty good Clash song back in the 70s. It was a marginally good movie. Some problems with race, some problems with violence, some problems with the fact that it just wasn't a great movie. And I think that's back in, I think that was about 1960-ish, somewhere around there. And there was Yul Brynner, Charles Bronson, bunch of guys, mercenaries, essentially, gunnies, hired to protect a Mexican town. And they're as always, you look at movies back in that time. That's 60 plus years ago, right? 65 years ago. There's going to be problems with race in movies in that time period, and we can accept that and move on. We can be critical and move on. We can just fade the movie and say no interest because it is. I'm going on. I saw it. Have I seen it since the 1970s? I don't know. I just know that it fits my narrative for today's podcast. So I'm employing it for that one purpose. I'm not endorsing the movie, and I can't tell you shit about it except that it was a bunch of gunnies protecting a Mexican town. How's that? How's that for deep? I guess I'm not going to be a threat to anybody currently working in the culture or film department of the New York Times. That was not a great review. Doesn't matter. Magnificent Seven also stands for seven companies, seven consequential, gigantic companies that affect our lives every day. Would it be fun if I could remember all seven of them and not F it up? Let's try. How about Apple, Amazon, and Alphabet? Unifying theme there that I could remember them first. They all begin with the letter A, which up until today was the first letter of our alphabet. So cheers to me. Meta, Microsoft, unifying theme, two M's. I'm up to five. Can I get to the finish line? Maybe, because one of them is Elon Musk. So we'll call that one Tesla. It's so much more and so much less because it's Elon. And the other one is NVIDIA. So that's the Magnificent Seven. And this is thanks DJT. That's a thanks Trump, because in the period of time approximately since the hostilities began in Iran, those seven companies in the aggregate together have lost a total of about 1.5 trillion in market cap. Were they voting to, did they have a vote when it came to, did Donald J. Trump call them up? Didn't call the French, didn't call any of our allies, didn't consult with anybody else because that's not the kind of guy he is. Donald J. Trump, as he said out loud, without puking in his own mouth. You know, I felt that the Iranians might invade. So, you know, I felt that was going to happen. So I attacked. You know, he's going on feels, and this is a very soon to be 80-year-old man who's in declining health and certainly mental wellness. Behavioral health has been broken for a very long time, and he's just feeling things. And he's talking to his buddy Bibi. It's interesting if you look at the way that Donald Trump has embraced Israel and the Jewish community more broadly, and you time one airplane is still flying. Before and after his beautiful daughter married Jared Kushner, you know, Trump has been a lot of different things, and he's changed them based on convenience. He was pro-choice. Now he's the softest pro-life. No religious affiliation really to shake a stick at. And now he's standing in front of a church waving a Bible that has his name printed on it, and he's holding it upside down. Now, I don't believe, I'm not a very religious person in the sense of Bible thumping. Is holding a Bible upside down a sign of the apocalypse? Does that mean that the Antichrist is cometh? I don't know. Don't care. But Donald Trump is a liar, and he's been full of shit for his entire adult life. Meaning I didn't know who he was until the 70s. You know, his dad, Fred, former affiliate of the KKK and real estate developer in the city of New York, not in Manhattan, but in the boroughs, in the Bronx, and then in Queens, maybe Staten Island, doesn't matter. He was not a blowhard, like a publicity-seeking blowhard like his son Donald is and was. So Fred Trump, while he was a big-time player, post-war building, all the soldiers came back. They needed places to live. There was funding and loans available to help soldiers get into a home and start a family. Well, Fred's contribution to that was building some affordable housing suitable to a GI Bill returning soldier. And of course, those communities were pretty. A lot of people with complexions that matched that color, as opposed to complexions that match the more diverse New York as it is today. Not surprising. And he was not. Fred Trump was not a big fan and proponent of integration of anything other than integrating his wealth with his money and vice versa. And he taught his son a lot of valuable lessons like that, like greed being good, and exclude colored people from your developments because they're nothing but trouble. And, I made that last one up, but that was the vibe that the entire Trump organization gave off. And with all of his, up and down on religion, on abortion, on conservative values, he was a registered Democratic Party member. He was probably at one point an independent. Now he's a registered Republican. He doesn't have any beliefs, values, virtues, or vision. He just went where the wind blew him in order to maximize wealth. He took that, the money that his dad staked him with in a lot of different tranches over the years in, net present value of those dollars was, I think between four and call it a $500 million. A lot of money. He downplays it, of course, like because he wants to be viewed as a self-made man. But the only thing that he's doing now is destroying things. He's destroying the lives of families in Iran. We've already talked about this, and there are bad people, and there are people that say death to America, death to Israel. Those are bad people that group, do they deserve to die? That's beyond my pay grade. Am I going to argue with a plan that eliminates people that want to kill Americans and Israelis? I'm not going to argue with that at all. I'm going to counsel against any plan that doesn't limit civilian casualties. And obviously, since we've seen how they operate. We've seen, even in the Caribbean, we've seen how they didn't kill a lot of civilians in Venezuela, but they were there for about a minute and a half and they killed 200 people. And those are people that, won't be sitting at the dinner table with their kids and grandkids. Some of those families are in Cuba and some are in Venezuela. We've talked about that before. Maybe some of them were Lebanese. I don't know. I don't know any of the families because, of course, there's precious little information about any casualties coming out of the administration. A lot in Israel, but a shit ton more in Gaza and Lebanon. The Houthis are jumping. That's the Houthi rebels. There's another longer name for the Houthis, but they're from Yemen. They are aligned with. They are an Iranian proxy, like Hezbollah. They're supported by Iran, and the difference when we've been focusing so much on the Strait of Hormuz, that the Houthis, what they would take away from us, the way that they can disrupt the oil market, is in the Red Sea, because that was kind of like the one of the back doors to getting some oil to customers around the world. Not all of them, not our allies, but up until now, China was able to get their tankers out. Up until now, India was able to get some out. India was warned off again today. And if the Houthis, I haven't watched the news in the last hour and a half or more. Maybe they've done other things. They've done some saber rattling and firing some missiles. But have they essentially stopped tanker traffic in the Red Sea by now? Could have happened. The the look through on the Brent crude spot price on the weekends ain't that great, because the markets in many places are closed. Obviously, Asia will be opening up first, so that's the beginning of the Monday trading activity. And I didn't look to see whether it was a holiday in Asia today or in the individual markets. The Korean markets have been getting hammered. China, the Hang Seng has been, Japan had some disappointing days, but Japan has been, Korea has really been taking a beating. And if as is rumored, and if as is supported by the limited data we have as the number of additional boots near the ground is accurate, and if there's a plan to take Kharg Island or in some other way intervene on Iranian soil, then things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And we'll learn that as we get into the late hours here, which, as you heard, it's not a flat Earth anymore. So that means the morning in the east. Yeah, but just as that data point again, with our Magnificent Seven losing market cap, of course, I mean, these things do swing, but it is these, the tech heavy NASDAQ hammered, right? The futures, I didn't look at the look ahead futures number projecting for Monday open in the United States. I'm going to imagine that it's not great. And all of this, you can't make a blanket statement that all of this was preventable, because that would make you a silly person. And I try not to be that. In this format, I'm silly in other ways, and when I'm walking the dog, maybe. But there are people whose lives are on the line. American soldiers, Israeli soldiers, innocents in Gaza, innocents in Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon. While perhaps not innocent, their families were probably still looking forward to having them home for dinner, and they're not coming home. So this needed to be dealt with. There are, of course, in the really highly technical military parlance, there are more than one way to skin a cat. Was putting this decision in the hands of Donald J. Trump, a game show host, and Pastor Pete Hegseth, a part-time weekend talking head on Fox News. Was that the best plan for the United States of America? I would argue it is not. It was not, and it is not. There is a reasonable argument for, now that you're in it, get done and get the F out. There's some merit to that, because you have $1 billion a day, $1 billion a day in our treasure. Our tax dollars is on fire to the tune of $1 billion a day. We're there. They reportedly they brought the Gerald Ford for some maintenance in the Baltics. I think they didn't. The toilets haven't been working. It was past the regularly scheduled maintenance when the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Battle Group and the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, which is the most modern in our fleet, was past maintenance when they were down in the Caribbean months ago. And so that is perhaps part of the poor planning. Waiting to get at least a tune-up before the full refit and maintenance. That's poor execution. And look at who we're dealing with, and we're not surprised. So here we are. Here are our Magnificent Seven taking a big haircut. Again, we don't celebrate, people have, on the rich person's problems, people have 401ks that are adversely affected. Also on the upper middle class, there are people with executive positions at Facebook, Meta, at these other companies. Right? People that work for, I'm not crying for Tim Cook. I'm actually, for any of them, which is almost all of them, that were lying prostrate on the White House, as the Rolling Stones said in the song Respectable, which I think was in Respectable was on the Some Girls album by the Rolling Stones, and I'm going to go with 79 as the issue date of that magnificent album, with an equally magnificent, if distasteful, cover. At least the original version, they kind of toned it down after the fact. The song Respectable says, "You're the latest lay on the White House lawn." Was at the inauguration time, and then returning to view for the private viewing of Amazon's Melania, when Tim Cook chose to go back to the White House for that private viewing. Was Tim Cook, on those two occasions, was he then the latest lay on the White House lawn? That's fair. Was Zuckerberg also? You can't, not every individual can be the latest lay, but I guess they can if they're just churning. If you're just going out on the White House lawn, dropping your trousers, having intimate contact with a leader, and then leaving, then you could always be the latest. So that could be Jeff Bezos, that could be Zuckerberg, that could be Tim Cook, and that could be any of those other clowns that showed up for that particular event. Any of those two events, because they prostrate themselves in the interest of again. I understand they're CEOs. I understand they have responsibilities to stockholders. I understand that. But how do you go about doing it? Not like that. Not like that. So, yeah. So they, and fucking Elon, you know, he is there, and he came back for more over and over again. When you think about, there was just I don't have the data point because I forgot it, but there was an article about how China is not standing still waiting to see what Trump is doing. China is moving ahead. They're always moving fast, and they're redoubling their efforts in all areas because they're a state-controlled economy in all areas. So in green tech, in wind and solar, in batteries, they are pedal to the floor because each year they accelerate past the US. That means that they're going to reap the profits of that position, dominance over the US market. And that's going to happen over and over again for a number of years. Because when you don't, it's much like the oil wells, right? You seal them off with wax. You can't just leave them sitting there with no maintenance. Go home and then return 2 months later after Donald Trump is done with his FAFO in the Arabian Gulf, and then you just turn on the switch again, and you've got the same daily output as you had 2 months ago. That isn't how it works. These these wells need to be capped, and then I'm going to call it primed because I'm not a fucking engineer. But there are processes that go into capping and then making the wells operational again. And this is happening over and over again. The gas, I'm going to guess, not an engineer again, is perhaps a little less cumbersome in the Middle East, in Oman and Qatar. Maybe there is an easier way to restart the process, but there's limited storage. China is the country that is best prepared. They have enough oil. I don't know the amount of natural gas they have stored, but as far as crude oil, they have more than 4 months. Like, so they have 100 days of supply, and they're getting some too at the same time. So they're not going to be fine because nobody's going to be fine, but they're going to be better suited to mitigate losses based on Trump and Bibi Netanyahu's decision to do this now. So, yeah. So that's a cheery Sunday update on. We can celebrate if by virtue of this chain of events, motorcycle or no, probably some sort of sports car that has an ungoverned muffler issue, and maybe they think that sounds cool. I'm not sure. I don't, but I know it's not an EV. Will Elon Musk? We read the stories about his new deal with the board, that he was set to be the first $1 trillion man. Will this disruption cause the board at Tesla? I mean, they're just, I'm sure they're real terrors when it comes to facing up to Elon, right? Because he's Elon. He will do crazy shit because he hangs out with people like DJT, and maybe he's dosed up double on ketamine. But is there a chance that he doesn't reach those goals immediately, as far as net worth and being the richest guy? Because it matters to a guy like that, because what else has he got? He's got 17 kids or whatever it is, but he doesn't seem to care as much about that. Yeah. Will I cry if these CEOs suffer at the hands of their boards, their stockholders? No. No. But I want the employees to continue to get paid. Sunday, fun day, outdoors. Not big timing you with the glasses. It's just the sun's very bright and it's kind of right there. So I didn't. It's Sunday, so you can excuse me if you think I'm big timing the pot. Not trying to do that. Wishing you all a beautiful remainder of your day, your evening, depending on where you are. And we will check in with you at some point during the day on Monday. And I'm going to lean into the camera, and if I can't find a way to do this elegantly, I'm going to just stand up, take 2 steps to my left into the shade with the camera, and do it inelegantly as I did about 2 days ago. But I'm going to give it the old college try first. So thank you. And respect, subscribe, do any of those things would be greatly appreciated. Engagement in any way, shape, or form. Thank you very much. Okay.